In 1976, Mao Zedong died after ruling China for 27 years. His face remains on every piece of Chinese currency. His portrait still hangs over Tiananmen Gate in Beijing, physically dominating the center of political power. And the political apparatus he founded, the Chinese Communist Party, still governs the most populous country on earth. Mao exists as an active, inescapable ghost, defining the reality of modern China. This chart shows the estimated casualties of history's major famines. The Great Leap Forward, a program of forced industrialization launched in 1958, caused a famine that killed between 15 and 55 million people in roughly 4 years. In 1966, he launched the Cultural Revolution, a decade of violence that killed up to 2 million people and set Chinese education and science back by a generation. But Mao is also the man who unified China after a century of foreign humiliation and systematically ended the feudal land system that had kept hundreds of millions of peasants in poverty for centuries. He defeated the nationalist forces of Chiang Kai-shek and transformed a semi-colonial backwater into a nuclear-armed state capable of challenging superpowers. The savior of the nation and its greatest destroyer are the exact same man. The scale of both the achievement and the catastrophe are almost too large to hold in the mind simultaneously. Mao was born in 1893, the son of a prosperous peasant farmer in Hunan province. From a young age, he was a voracious reader, deeply ambitious for social change. He came of age during the collapse of the Qing dynasty and the chaos of the warlord era, a time when Chinese intellectuals were desperately searching for a path to national renewal. In 1921, he helped found the Chinese Communist Party. Over the following decades, he adapted Marxism to Chinese conditions by centering the revolution on the rural peasantry rather than urban workers. Facing annihilation by the Nationalist Army in 1934, Mao's forces began the Long March, a 6,000-mile retreat through some of the country's most treacherous terrain. Of the 100,000 soldiers who began the march, fewer than 10,000 completed it. The survivors became a cohesive, hardened force with an unshakable commitment to the revolution. By 1949, Mao's army had driven the nationalists to Taiwan. On October 1st, he stood at Tiananmen Gate and declared the founding of the People's Republic of China. Surviving the impossible odds of the Long March convinced Mao that sheer revolutionary willpower could overcome any physical or economic reality. In 1958, Mao applied that willpower to economics. The Great Leap Forward was a forced attempt to transform China into a modern industrial society in just a few years. Agricultural collectivization proved catastrophic. Farmers lost their individual incentives, and planting decisions were made by party officials who had no knowledge of farming. Peasants were taken from the fields to produce steel in makeshift backyard furnaces. Crops were left to rot unharvested, while the labor force was diverted to industrial experiments. Local officials, terrified of being accused of sabotage, reported record-breaking harvests that didn't exist. This flowchart shows false data inflating at every level. Based on these fabrications, the state exported grain for hard currency even as the people starved. Scholarly accounts estimate at least 45 million people died between 1958 and 1962. Records from Chinese archives document that Mao was aware of the deaths. He eventually reduced grain quotas in 1960 to ease the famine, but he never admitted failure. The absolute power required to build the state had created a system too terrified to tell the truth, weaponizing the bureaucracy against the population. In 1966, Mao launched the Cultural Revolution to reassert his authority and reclaim total dominance over the party. He weaponized the youth into Red Guard units, ordering them to destroy anyone labeled bourgeois or counter-revolutionary. Schools and universities were closed. Scientists, doctors, and teachers were publicly humiliated, beaten, sent to labor camps, or killed by teenagers who believed they were executing a revolution. Mao even targeted his own inner circle. Deng Xiaoping was purged twice, and his designated successor, Liu Shaoqi, was imprisoned and denied medical treatment until he died in captivity. In his final decade, Mao essentially cannibalized the nation he built, proving that his ultimate loyalty was to his own authority rather than the state. The era ended with Mao's death in 1976 and the arrest of his closest allies, the Gang of Four. To preserve legitimacy, the Communist Party passed a resolution on Mao's legacy. This scale represents their decree. Mao was 70% correct and 30% wrong. This formula acknowledged the disasters while shielding their founder, providing stability for a new era of national transformation. Today, 1.4 billion people live in the country that Mao built, broke, and rebuilt, navigating a reality that is still deeply tethered to his legacy. But while China reckoned with its internal aftermath, a 50-year standoff was defining the rest of the world. Proxy wars were exploding across Korea, Vietnam, Angola, and Nicaragua. Next episode, nuclear brinksmanship, covert operations, and the global struggle for dominance, the Cold War.